Hola, I'm Claudia Romo Edelman.
And I'm Cynthia Kleinbaum Milner.
And this is a podcast, A la Latina.
The playbook to succeed being your authentic self.
Today, the incredible Rebeca Vargas.
She's the Chief Marketing Officer at the Girl Scouts.
And these are the 3 key takeaways of this podcast. Number 1, how she raised her hand all the time to pitch herself for a new job. Actually, she told us how she emailed the CEO of her unit telling her about new business idea that actually ended up being her job.
She shared with us a personal story of leaving her daughter when she was 5 months old with her mom back in Mexico, like many immigrants have to do to come and build a life of their own in the US. She shared all the sacrifices she had to make and how she feels about them now that she can look back at them with perspective.
Number 3, in a world of uncertainty where there's so much language and discussion about this terminology, Rebeca brings a light on what is diversity, equity, and inclusion and how is it different from multicultural marketing and how you should learn how to differentiate it. All of that and more here at A la Latina.
Stick around! Before this episode starts, go to alalatina.com and sign up for our newsletter. We've put together a ton of career advice and worksheets that you can download to manage your career and get to the top in half the time
with half the bruises. A la Latina. Today, a very special guest, my dear friend Rebeca Vargas, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of the Girl Scouts.
Rebeca has spent more than 20 years in the banking sector. She held leadership positions at Citigroup, JPMorgan Chase, and Wells Fargo, and she also spent about 10 years in the nonprofit sector.
Rebeca, it's so great to have you here.
Hola, thank you for having me. Un gustazo, Claudia, Cynthia. Thank you.
So it's a real honor. I mean, honestly, there's a bunch of things that I am just discovering about you, and we know each other. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about you? What made you be who you are, what you do today?
That's a long question, but I'll try to answer a little bit. I am a Mexican, now Mexican-American or Latina in the U.S., who came to this country 26 years ago.
Wow.
I was born and raised in Mexico City. I started my professional career in Mexico. I studied at the ITAM, and then I joined, at the time, Bancomer, now BBVA. My dream was always to be an executive at a bank at a very, very young age. I would say my first job was actually working at Nafinsa, at a bank in Mexico when I was only 12 years old. I was a golondrina, a job that doesn't exist anymore. El mensajero, the delivery guy, the delivery woman. That's how I started at 12 years old. It was a program for children of senior executives in the bank at the time. So it was like 40 of us who, during the summer, we had basically a summer internship, but it was a formal internship, paid internship. I had my responsibilities. But again, the responsibilities were it was, now I'm going to date my age, right? Everybody's going to know how old I am. But it was back then when secretaries would type, right, the memos for the bosses, and then they would put them in an envelope, and then it would be delivered to the CEO, the boss, whatever, and you had to go to the different buildings to deliver.
So messenger within the building.
A messenger within So that's how I actually started my career at Nafinsa when I was 12 years old. And that confirmed my desire to work for a bank. And then obviously I went to the ITAM, I graduated, I joined Bancomer at the time, and I had the amazing opportunity of being part of a small group of 2 people who created the risk management function. At the time, the bank was involved in derivative products. The bank was paying a lot of money for swaps operations. No one knew what that was. And I had the opportunity of building that team from scratch from the beginning, and then subsequently lead the bank's participation in the creation of the Mexican derivative exchange.
Wow.
So that was in Mexico. And then after working in the bank for almost 5 years, I decided that I wanted to come to the U.S. to do an MBA.
Any one of your family was already in the U.S.?
My father had studied an MBA when I was 2 years old. Actually, in terms of language, it's kind of an easy and an interesting story that shows the amazingness of kids. How we learn languages. I never studied English. The English that I know, I basically learned it when I was 2 years old, and my father was studying an MBA in the U.S.
And you were with him here?
I went, with my family, so I went to kindergarten here. But anyway, so yes. I think it was my father who inspired me to come study an MBA. And I came, frankly, with the intention of going back to Mexico right after graduation. And I came more because of the personal experience. It was my desire to leave my home. You know, those of us who grew up in Mexico, we are used to, you stay with your parents until you get married. And I was single, but I was working at Bancomer. And I had the gusanito, the internal desire of coming to the US and having the experience of living by myself and studying in the US. So I came, and no surprise, I had like 7 job offers after when I was like, you get the job offers after the first year. So I decided to join Citigroup.
And you wanted to stay in banking.
I wanted to stay in banking, but I wanted to go back to Mexico. And my bosses were waiting for me. I had an amazing experience. Like I said, I worked in building the MEXDER, which is a Mexican Derivatives Exchange. I was leading a team of people. I was director, etc. I just came for the personal experience, really. But then I got a job offer that was interesting enough with Citigroup, and I decided to take it. And it was, I would say, in the beginning, it was a little bit frustrating because it was a management associate program. So I basically, when I left Mexico, as I said, I was already a director. I was leading a team. I was responsible for opening a whole market. And then I joined Citi as a management associate, which is like the lowest position in the organization.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I had to build a name for myself in a different culture, in a different language, having no mentors, no supporters, no one. And what I remember from those days, it was my desire to do the same thing that I had done at BBVA in Mexico, which was to progress within the organization, right? I mean, to become a senior executive. That was my dream. And I came from a culture in Mexico where you have to prove yourself, right? I mean, you have to work very hard and prove to people that you can do more. And at the time, my first boss at Citi would say to me, no, you're here to learn. Don't worry. And I would say to him, I'm here to do things. I'm not here to learn. Like I already learned in Mexico. I already learned.
MBA.
Yes. So anyway, he would say to me, no, you're learning. And now in retrospective, I think in a way he was right. Through those initial years at Citi, I think I learned the US way.
Yeah.
I was not necessarily learning technical skills, but I definitely learned the US way of working in corporate America. And in those initial days, I learned some of the US values that later in my career shaped a lot of my decisions and a lot of the positions that I ultimately had.
I want to just take 2 threads that you just said. The first one is you're not the first one, and I had the same experience. So I think it happens often that when you start your career outside of the US, you get a lot of opportunities, big opportunities fast. Because if you were in America and you were going to build the derivatives department of a bank, no way they would let a very junior person be involved in that or like leading it. Same thing in Nestle. I started my career at Nestle, and I was leading the brand Nesquik very early on. And when I went to my MBA, all the job offers I had for marketing were for marketing associate. Same exact thing. And I didn't take those jobs. But I love hearing how you, now that you have the perspective, you look back and you say, okay, it wasn't a very senior job, but my boss told me I was here to learn. And even though in the moment I was like, oh, I want to get promoted, I want to get up. It's always good to take the time to learn and to digest and to understand the way of working in the US, which I think I didn't get it at the time. So I wonder now what my career would look like if I had taken one of those jobs. And I'm looking at your career, and I think it was good that you stay there in Citi and you learn that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, this country tends to be very specialized, right? Sometimes in our countries in Latin America, you're right, you get to do a lot, right? And here there is more specialization. And at the time, it was very frustrating for me. But I think that through my career in the US, I have been able to always raise my hand. And that's what I've always taught my kids and the girls in the non-for-profit world that I've helped and my mentees. I always say to them, raise your hand. And by raising your hand, what I mean is go out there, talk to your bosses, talk to your managers, and suggest things. So the fascinating thing about my career, especially in the beginning here in the US, is that I almost never had a pre-existing position.
Oh wow, you always
I always created
created.
my positions, which is an amazing opportunity that people gave to me. But I also work for it because again I raised my hand and I presented the business case and the opportunity to create those roles, and that's how I operate.
Can we you give us an example? Can you pitch me a position that you took, and like how did you actually go and pitch a position?
So the first one in
Okay.
the US that I did, I was graduating from that, finishing that MA program, the associate program. And it was a very selective program. That's why, going back to what you were saying, the reason why I took that position is because even though it was very junior, it was a very selective program. So it was 10, 12 of us, MBA grads from across the country. And the idea was that they were going to take care of us and mentor us to become CFOs across Citigroup's businesses around the world. So it was a very entry position, but it was a very selective group of us, like 10 or 12, and it was very rewarding. But anyway, the first time I raised my hand was when I was working in M&A, mergers and acquisitions for Citigroup, at the time when Sandy Weil was very active and we bought several banks, etc. And among those, we bought Banamex in Mexico, right? I participated in the integration. I was one of the very small group of senior executives who would travel every week to Mexico to manage the integration between Citibank Mexico and Banamex. And when we finished the integration, I raised my hand. I literally sent an email to March Magner, at the time the CEO for the Global Consumer Bank at Citigroup, and I said to her, we now have a bank in Mexico, largest bank at the time in Mexico. The US population is growing, and we are not doing anything to address that population. So that was back in 2001. And I said to her, I want to do something about it. We are in a unique situation. We are the only US bank who owns the largest bank in Mexico. She responded to my email. She said, come, let's meet. And that changed my career. So I had been previously focused on risk management, like I mentioned in Mexico, and then corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions in the beginning at Citi, and that changed. That was a pivotal time in my career where I went from doing M&A to leading Citigroup's efforts to target the Hispanic market in the US.
You've been talking about raising your hand. Is that something that comes from your family? Is that a personal characteristic? Where did you get that from? And how do you think that has helped you in your career?
I think that it comes from my family. It comes from my parents. I think I learned that from my parents. In general, I don't think all Latinos raise our hands. I think we are a culture, particularly Mexicans, I would say, among Latinos. We tend to be very quiet. We come, I think, from a culture where, like I said before, you work very hard, you put your head down, and you hope that someone is going to notice that. I remember my first interview in Mexico when I was graduating from the ITAM and I joined Bancomer. My boss at the time, actually the person who was my boss's boss, very senior individual reporting to the CEO, during the interview back in Mexico, he said to me, so tell me, why should I hire you? I was coming out from college, very young, right? And I said to him, my answer was, contrátame y te lo demuestro. Like, hire me and I'll prove to you why you should hire me. He smiled and he said, you start on Monday. If I had answered that in the US, no one would have hired me, right? Because this is a culture where you have to like promote yourself and sell yourself. So definitely this concept of raising your hand is definitely something that I don't think it's part of us Latinos, Latinas. But I learned a little bit of that during MBA. Like when you're starting an MBA, that's something that they keep telling you, right? They prepare you for the interviews that first year of the MBA program. They prepare you for the interview. So I learned a little bit during that. And then through the years, but mostly I would say it's something that I learned from my parents. My mother lost her mom. My father lost her dad at a very, very young age. And they had to basically survive a little bit by themselves, helping the family finances in both cases. My father started his career in banking also as a delivery within the organization, just like I did. He started like that and became second level, reporting to the CEO as the chief auditor for the central bank in Mexico. So I learned that desire to
Volunteer
work,
and to go to the
to work very
places.
hard and to prove yourself and to always aspire to do more and to become successful. So I think the raising my hand, I got it from my parents, and I don't think it comes naturally to Latinas. I have to remind myself constantly of doing it.
So, in that first job that you raised your hand and you said, I want to market to the Latino population. So, that was the beginning of you marketing towards multicultural groups.
Yeah, that was back in 2001,
Wow.
2002.
That's so much
So
earlier
Yeah.
than
I
marketing.
became really a pioneer in the banking industry in marketing to the Latino community. I was the first person to advocate for Latinos within the bank. I pitched the acceptance of the Mexican matricula card and Latin American matricula cards as forms of ID to open bank accounts.
Oh, wow.
I did the first TV spots in language. I started building end-to-end capabilities in Spanish for the Latino segment. And more importantly, what I did at Citi, I did a lot of product development to respond to the particular needs of the Latino community. So I created an entry bank account. I created a free money remittance service. We even did a mortgage product with iTeens, a binational credit card. So we did a lot of product development tailored to the unique needs of the Latino community.
I think this is reminding me when we spoke to Jessica Alba, and she was saying that the reason why we need Latinos behind the camera and writing stories is because it's so much easier to build something when you have lived that experience. And yeah, you can have customer research, you can try to understand the customer, but you will never be able to live the experience. And I think it's important to remind executives and CEOs that they have to have Latinos in their employee base if they want to sell to Latinos. Because it doesn't matter how much research they read about how to talk to a Latino, it's going to be a much better ad if you have a Latino writing the ad, shooting the ad behind the camera, in front
Exactly.
of the camera.
As a marketer, I always say you can only market what you have,
Yeah,
right?
the product.
You need to have the product, you need to have the experience, you need to have all of that so that then you can market it.
But it is clear to me that, like you were innovative and entrepreneurial and raising your hand. How did you navigate it? How did you get promoted all through your career? And what did you do after?
Hasn't been easy, but I was able to start, like I said, as a management associate and become a managing director and become one of the 3 highest ranked Latinas in the organization.
This was in
I
Citibank?
was at Citigroup, yes.
Citigroup.
I was the first Latina to be profiled in the diversity report, and as I said, became the highest ranked Latina in the organization. I think it was a combination of things that allow me to do that. Definitely my drive and my desire to do more. I would get in the office at 8:30 and would leave at 8:30, which is what I was used to do in Mexico, working from 8 to 8. I did the same in the US. So definitely working very hard, always guided by the values that my parents taught me, always acting with integrity, with honesty, hardworking. I think that's the basics. But then also through that, trying to learn the American way. The reason why this is also, I think, an interesting thing that happened in my life that was it was an experience that changed my personal life, and it also changed my professional life. When I came to the US and my first day at business school, I remember vividly. I had to sign up some paperwork, right? And I was in this office, and the woman on the other side of the glass, she gave me the paperwork and she said, fill them out. And I was filling them. And one of the questions was ethnicity, right? And I didn't know what to put because, coming from Mexico, what you are,
Yeah.
brunette, brown eyes, 176, whatever height, right? So I told the woman, I don't know what to answer in this question. And she said, well, you have an accent. What language do you speak? And I said, Spanish. Oh, you're Hispanic. And I said, I'm Hispanic? Yeah. Okay. That was my first day in business school. And at the time, I didn't care. I just filled out the form and I gave it to her, and that was it. I graduated, right? And then I went to Citigroup. And I was working in finance, corporate finance, M&A, etc. And I thought to myself, how am I going to progress in this? And I was, like I said, in the beginning, it was a little bit frustrating because I was already a director. I was leading a whole team in Mexico. And then I came here and I started from scratch. So what I did was something that at the time, most Latinos were not doing. Now, most Latinos do, but at the time, they were doing the opposite. And what I did was to embrace the Hispanic woman inside me and to embrace my Mexican citizenship. What I said is, I am going to succeed in this country because I am Mexican and because they do not understand that they need women like me to understand the Latino market, which is a business imperative for the bank. So that's also what I did. A long answer to your question, but it was also embracing my, now I say it, Latina, Hispanic heritage. At the time, I would say embracing my Mexican heritage.
But it hasn't been easy, you said.
It hasn't been easy because we work differently, right? Pitching the idea of targeting the Latino segment wasn't easy. It's something that sometimes you get the answer of, yes, 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 you are right, but you don't get the funding or you don't get the support. Or it has happened in my career that people have said, you have an accent, I don't understand what you say. And this is coming from people who frankly don't have MBAs. I graduated from an MBA in the US. I went to school in the US. And I did get at some point in my career someone who said to me, a manager who said to me, I don't understand. You shouldn't have this job because your English is not good, right? And to myself, I kept saying, well, this woman doesn't have an MBA. I have an MBA, right? But it's that constant of like, you have to be confident in yourself and you have to know what you're bringing to the table, and you have to know that you own a seat at the table and you deserve it and you have worked hard for it and you can contribute.
Can you walk us through the big decisions you've made in your career? You've worked in at least 5 organizations for a good amount of time. So, how did you make those decisions to leave Citi and then go to nonprofit, for profit? How was that for you?
So I left Citi because I got an offer from JPMorgan Chase at the time. Ryan McInerney, who was the head of the consumer bank at the time, called me and they said they were interested. At Citi, I had built the Latino segment. I had done product development and marketing for the Latino segment, and Chase was starting to do the same. Charlie Scharf at the time was the CEO for the consumer bank, and he invited me. I met with them, and they said, we want you. Basically, we want you to come to Chase to do the same thing that you did at Citi. And I was pregnant with my first child, my daughter, at the time. And I remember he invited me to have breakfast to tell me about the opportunity, etc. And I was showing, right? And we spoke and whatever. And I said, well, yes, I'm interested, but look at me, right? And again, this is the Latina inside me, right? We come from a culture where you don't, or at the time, I didn't think about, well, I'm going to go on maternity leave and then I'm going to take some time and what am I going to do? And that's not right. And because I was always used to, like I said, 8 to 8, 8 to 9 in the office. So I told him, I'm interested, but I'm pregnant. And he looked at me and he said, again, learning lesson from me, the Mexican working in the US, he looked at me and he said, so what? And I said, well, I cannot start right now, or if I start right now, I'm going to have to leave for a little. He said, don't worry, we want you. We'll wait for you. So they waited for me, and I had my child. And since I was busy at work, etc., I didn't plan the way I should have planned. So my daughter was born. I went to spend my maternity leave in Mexico, which was only 12 weeks. The 12-week comes, and my mom says to me, so what are you going to do when you go back? And I said, well, I don't know. Like, I really didn't know. Like, I had not planned for it because my life was work. And then now I have this child, but I had not planned. Long story short, I decided to leave my daughter with my mom in Mexico. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Now I can say it without crying, but for many years I cried. So that also brought me closer to the Latino community in the US. I mean, I myself experienced what so many immigrants experience. So I left her there for 5 months, and then I came back. I joined Chase. They waited for me. I joined the bank. I had to start rebuilding my name in a different corporation. Where yes, I had some people from Citi had moved to Chase, so a few executives knew me, but nevertheless, my team didn't know me. I had to build a name for myself. So anyway, that's that.
And your daughter came to the US with you when
Like 6 months later,
that
my mom
sounds
brought
like.
her back. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will want to hear that.
You know, it's interesting. I just had this conversation with my daughter. Like, would you ever forgive me for not being present with you all the time? And because I know how hard I worked and how often I traveled. And she was like, "Were you not always there?" And I was like, "Exactly. Perfect answer. Thank you. Let's go shopping.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I need to know."
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, we do what we do as mothers, like what we have to do.
You know,
what we
I
can do.
am a firm believer that kids learn from by observing. I mean, they listen, they observe, and I think that's the best example that we can give them.
You know, I'm surprised this topic hasn't come up in any of our previous interviews, but this idea that when you start your career and you have kids, a lot of women leave the workforce, and those that stay have to make a lot of sacrifices. But I believe, I'm sure, like there's people that are happy not working for the rest of their life. But I have a lot of friends that left the workforce when they had kids, and now that their kids went to college, they're kind of struggling. They're like, I don't know, like I want to find purpose in life. And it's not like your work is going to be your purpose, but I want our audience to not feel like they have to leave work because of something that's happening right now. Because if you push through and you work hard and you make sacrifices, then at the end of the day,
I am a firm believer. We can do it. We can do both things. It's going to be hard, maybe sometimes. You have to make sacrifices, but it's possible.
and then the second thing that you kind of brought up, and I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about that, this idea that you leave a job and you think that they're not going to call your former manager. They're going to find a way to find who you used to work for to get a real like reference call for about your work. I always, when I hire somebody, I always try to find somebody that used to work with that person. And believe it or not, the corporate world tends to be pretty small. Like if you wanted to talk to somebody in the financial services industry in New York and find out something, you could do it. In the fashion world in New York, you can, when I was working in fashion, like who is this person? And I'm gonna call their former manager and get a real back channel reference. So make sure that if you leave a job, you're not happy, you got another offer, whatever, make sure that you leave a good name.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's what, like I mentioned before, honesty, integrity,
Right.
and hard work.
Value.
And
Exactly.
and besides hard work is work that deliver results, because you can also work a lot without delivering results. So you
Right.
have to be efficient.
Right.
So it's that integrity, honesty, and delivery of results. And you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, it's a very small world. The banking world is actually very small. Many years later, after I had spent 10 years in the non-for-profit world, when they called me, when someone from Wells Fargo reached out and say, we are looking for someone with your profile, would you be interested? The reason why I said yes, I would be interested is because at Wells Fargo currently is the people who originally hired me to move from Citi to Chase. So when I went there again, the person who was my boss called the person who had been my boss at Chase, who is now at Wells, and said, what's your opinion? He gave a very good opinion, and that's how they hire me. So yes, it's
a small world.
Yes.
It is a small world. Watch out.
Yeah.
How did you move from Citi to JPMorgan and then to non-for-profit?
So Citi to JPMorgan, I shared it. They invited me. And then I was at a time at JPMorgan Chase where a couple of things happened. One is in the bank, I had been asked to lead an enterprise-wide initiative that was about putting controls in place. It was a time where this whole notion of risk management and control was becoming one of the most important things in banking. And I was not very excited with the work because my nature is someone of like innovative, creative, entrepreneurial. I love marketing, etc. And then I was asked to lead this very important initiative, but it was about establishing controls related to all the servicing in language. Since I had developed the service in language, meaning in Spanish, then they asked me to develop these controls, to implement these controls. Anyway, I wasn't very happy with the role at the time. And at the same time, someone at JPMorgan who was sitting on the board of some organization learned about the need that the US Mexico Foundation had for a new CEO. So she recommended me. So she was a peer of mine at JPMorgan. She learned about this opportunity and she said, Rebecca would be great. The board contacted me and asked to meet with me, and that's how.
But I have a question there. I'm sorry. We don't have enough great leaders in non-for-profits, Latino non-for-profits, because it's hard on the pay. How did you take it? How did you decide to go from corporate banking salaries to non-for-profit salaries?
Very good question. I've always listened to my parents since I was very young. And at the time, I already had my daughter and my son. My son maybe was like maybe 4 or 5. And my mother at some point had sat down me and said, listen, you are very senior. At the time, I was one of the 2 highest ranked Latinas at JPMorgan Chase. It was only 2 of us, 2 Latinas, managing director, very, very senior, right? And I was traveling a lot. I was overseeing marketing, communications, and philanthropy for Latin America across 7, 8 countries. So I was traveling a lot, very busy, not seeing my kids a lot, honestly. And my mom said to me, you know what? I am very proud of you. You have been very successful, but you don't see your kids enough. And you will not see them soon because they will leave. And I kept that in the back of my mind. And 3, 4 years later, this happened. The board calling me not being very happy with the job at the time. And I decided to leave because of my family. So I made the decision that some women do I thought moving to the non-for-profit world is going to give me more flexibility. I was completely wrong.
Yes.
Completely wrong. As the CEO of the organization and with my internal desire to do new things and create new things, I was completely wrong. I was very busy. I was still traveling just to Mexico versus multiple countries, but I was still traveling. But that's why. It was a combination of what my mom had said, the work not being so enjoyable at the time, and and the desire to be with my kids.
So looking back, just trying to give some insight to our listeners, how could you have known that you were not going to get what you wanted from that job? Because I think a lot of us, the interview process is so fast, right? You meet somebody for 30 minutes, maybe 10 people, but they're always 30-minute interviews, maybe 45. And suddenly you're in a new job and you're like, oh, I didn't ask about this thing. So how can you make sure that when you go with your eyes wide open to a new job?
I think you can never know exactly what the job is going to entail. At least in my case, it was a little bit on me. If I had done the job the way the previous CEO was doing it, frankly, I would have had more time for my kids. But I was not like that, right? I inherited an organization that was only acting as second tier, meaning we would get funding in the US and then give grants to organizations in Mexico. That's all the organization was doing. If I had continued to do that, then yes, I would have had more time for my family. But I am someone who is never happy with the status quo. I'm always trying to do more and better. And I have a lot of ideas in my head, kind of like some people who I know. I have always ideas in my head and I want to do them. So I was there and I'm like, there is so much potential and we can do so much more.
And that's your brand. I have to say, for as long as I remember hearing about you and knowing you, your brand is you get things done. Can you actually tell us, like,
your superpower?
What are your superpowers?
I am a Latina in the US who is proud of her Mexican heritage. I am passionate about marketing and passionate about helping the Latino community and also women. Passionate about working on women empowerment, particularly youth girls. And I just try to apply my creativity and entrepreneurial spirit on creating new things either programs for a social cause or banking products. But another aspect I think of my Latinidad that I always bring to the table is creativity. And by creativity, I mean innovative and different ways of doing things. What I find in this country, maybe going back a little bit to what you said, like back in our countries, we used to do everything. And here we do this thing. I've never done this thing in the US. I've always done whatever I wanted to do, right? Because I believe, and this is for the audience and the girls who I mentor, we can do whatever. And we don't need to do this thing. We can do as much as we want. And we can do it in different ways. And that's where the creativity comes. When you talk about me being a convener, I think you're right. Because when I think about what's the marketing campaign that we can come up, what's the partnership that we can establish with 3 organizations, it has to be a win-win for all parties. But I'm always thinking we can partner with many organizations. The other thing, which is maybe different than most marketers think or most business people think, I do try to bring people and organizations together for a particular purpose. I know it's very high level what I'm saying, but it's...
No, it's a convening power. That's a Latina thing. It's our family style. That's why I think that we have to flip the script in so many areas, because people don't see us as, like that as a superpower. They see it as like, wow, okay, you love your family or whatever. You're too social.
Yeah.
Oh, no. It's something that we bring on everything like we do. Like, for example, when I was at Wells Fargo and I pitched the idea of keeping the sponsorship of the Mexican national soccer team, I did it because I think it made business case, right? And it was actually a very successful program in terms of bringing new customers to the bank. But I also was the person who pushed the Mexican Soccer Association in including in the sponsorship the women's team. So then Wells Fargo became the first corporation in the US in sponsoring the women's Mexican national team. So there is opportunity always to include on everything that we do this aspect of sorority and networking among women and supporting each other. And it's a muscle that it's not natural. It's a muscle that we need to work. And that's why I've always tried to do that on everything that I do. And then when I had my daughter, even more, I saw the opportunity and the need to empower and to mentor young women.
So right now, I mean, by the time this podcast goes live, we're probably will continue being in an environment in which D&I is attacked and businesses are kind of like avoiding even the conversation. You were so early on in your companies building the case to invest in Latinos as consumers, maybe building the case to invest in Latinos as employees by you being a rock star. What would you tell our audience if they are working in a company that has eliminated D&I programs, it's not investing in the Latinos as consumers? Like, what can they do to continue with the work that you started and that we are focusing on?
Yeah. So when I started on this, I thought about it differently than maybe the way I do now. At the time, D&I and multicultural marketing were 2 completely separate things, right? Multicultural marketing was a business strategy and a marketing effort to attract more Latino consumers. In my case, to sell more bank accounts, to bank more Latinos, etc., more banking products in general. That was a business opportunity that was so obvious. The 2000 census had just come out, and it was already pointing to the importance of the segment. So everything that I did was backed by data, right? And it was from a business opportunity. This is a segment of the market that we cannot avoid. D&I didn't exist at the time, but I did see the opportunity to highlight the importance of bringing more people, Latinos and everything, to the organization, because we bring a different perspective. With my experience having worked in Mexico and studied in the US and worked in different places, you bring a different perspective to everything that an organization does. And the way I pitched that idea was by creating the first employee network at Citigroup. So I was the founder and president of the Hispanic Employee Network at Citi back in 2001, which was the first employee network. And that network had three objectives. One objective was to promote the Latino segment as a business priority. The second one was to promote the recruitment of more Latinos in the organization. And then the third objective was to promote the culture and be like
Pride.
yeah, the pride. But the first two objectives of the network were very important. And that's where we somehow combined the D&I that, again, at the time, the D&I office was just starting to create. But going back to your question, what I would say to people is the business imperative of the Latino segment is there. And all the data is very clear, right? We have the fifth economy in the world. We are the fastest growing segment, number one segment in many industries. So the business imperative is not going away. And those CEOs and corporations who know the data and are doing things the right way know it. And they will continue to do it. They will continue to invest in the Latino segment. What's happening, though, in multicultural marketing is very interesting. Many of us who started doing multicultural marketing 20 years ago, we were always advocating to do more advertising in Spanish and to invest in language, etc. I feel like we were in a way so successful that now it has gone 360. Not always for the good, but now there are people in marketing who say, well, the general market is the Latino market. So because the general market is the Latino market, then we don't need to spend on this additional thing called multicultural. We don't need to do culturally relevant messages or Spanish messages, because we just need to include more Latinos in the casting for the general market spots. So again, we have gone, like, people talk about it, but sometimes there is still the risk of them not investing enough in the Latino segment. So my answer to that is we need to go back to the data and back to prove that in order to reach Claudia, you can reach her mind with English, but you may only be able to reach her heart, her soul, with Spanish or English and Spanish. So there is always the opportunity still to do culturally relevant messaging. In language or not language, but the cultural relevancy needs to be there.
And your first objective in 2001 in the creation of the first ever affinity group at Citi, that is crazy to think of. Wow. But also, I think that that's what we're doing now. Like we still have to promote the Latino segment as a business imperative. I mean, like I'm sorry, I think that that's what I do day long.
Yes, you do.
Sure.
And we still need to continue to do it. Yes.
But I think what I really liked from what you said is we have to think about it as one. Like it's the D&I and the multicultural as a consumer. Like the best way to reach Latino consumers is understanding them and having your employee base reflect your consumer base. So
there's a bridge to be made. Maybe we're stretching the I when I started working in this space, I was slammed and my hands were slapped a couple of times by multicultural marketers that said, you're trying to bridge DI with multicultural marketing and it's not the same. And there's no relationship. But then there's still a bridge to be made about, like, can you really make a case between, do you need to have an employee base to reflect your marketing efforts or not, right? Like, and then in this particular time, no one is challenging the marketing side. People are challenging the employee side. And I think that that's where we need to we need to be a little bit more nuanced.
I think it's two different things. I still believe that back then there were two different things. I still think it's two different things that obviously come together, particularly in marketing, to your point. But I think you should have employees that represent your customer base across all aspects of the organization. Customer service, operations, product development, strategy. We, diverse consumers, need to be present in all aspects of corporate America because we understand the audience, right? And we can provide that different perspective. In marketing in particular, yes, by all means, we should have also the language expertise, the cultural expertise, but it's across all aspects, not only marketing. Yeah.
So we have to wrap up, but I would love to know if there's anything that you would like to add. Is there anything that our young Latinas, rising Latinas, or trailblazer Latinas should think about, or anything that you would like to tell them?
Yeah, I mean, for the young Latinas who are out there, never be shy about your heritage. Be proud of your cultural heritage. Be proud of what comes with it. Yes, we cry more, maybe, just like I did, and I say it, and it is what it is, and I don't hide it. Learn to raise your hand. Don't be shy about talking about your experiences, your success, your capacity, your abilities. Say it in the interviews, and then prove it every day. Learn to compete and leverage your heritage background as well as your skills as you work to progress.
We didn't talk about your nonprofit that you started. Did you wanted to say anything about it? Like,
I mean, at some point in my career, I started a non-for-profit called the U.S. Mexico Leaders Network with a desire to empower girls in Mexico, high school girls from underserved communities, 50% of them who live in rural areas, to empower them and to prepare them to go to college and study careers in STEM. Careers in STEM because I believe those are the careers that are going to give them opportunity to get good salaries in the future. And it's a program that was very successful, is very successful. We created a network of female mentors across 22 countries, Latina, mostly Mexican women who left Mexico to do PhDs and masters across 22 countries and are all interested in going back and helping Mexico and helping women, youth from many places. It's a program that changed the way I am as a woman, as a mom, as a professional, because I saw firsthand the amazing, beautiful impact, transformational impact that we had in these girls. Girls who live in casas de cartón, literally, like in the middle of nowhere in rural Mexico, going to college, graduating from college, and having the desire to go study masters abroad.
It still exists, the organization?
Yes, it's smaller because I don't have the time to dedicate as much as I used to, but we created chapters. The girls created chapters. So we have more than 100 chapters actually as part of the organization that are now led by the alumni.
What's the name or what's the website? So
U.S. Mexico Leaders Network and is Mujeres Líderes en STEM.
Amazing. I like that it's small and only has 100 chapters. I cannot wait until it's big. So what advice, as a last question, what advice would you give your 30-year-old self?
That's a very good question. Maybe be a little bit more calm. I was always working and trying to do more and more. Maybe sometimes not spending enough time with family. Maybe that's the only advice I would give. But I don't regret anything of what I've done professionally, nor personal. But I do think I could have spent a little bit more time thinking about myself. Sometimes I don't pause to reflect on myself. And I think that's what as I get older, I think I'm starting to do it more and more.
Well, I hope that this episode is going to allow people to take a pause and reflect on your own careers and their own path moving forward. So I am really beyond grateful of having you here, Rebeca.
On the contrary, thank you. Thank you both for the invitation.
Thank you for showing that you can succeed and you can live a la Latina.